Thank you, Christopher, and welcome. We appreciate your taking your time from what we know are very busy schedules to be with us for the next 45 minutes or so. Panelists, thank you for being here. Just a couple of housekeeping comments. In the spirit of transparency, while myself as well as my panelists, colleagues here, consult with a number of different companies and industry, and those consulting arrangements may be very varied. None of us are here today on the payroll of a commercial entity to sell you a product or a concept. That's number one. Number two, the decision as to whether or not you engage in managed care now or going forward is a decision that each and every one of you will need to make independently. We are simply here to provide with you our experiences over the past 2 decades, unfortunately in my case, the past 2 decades plus, of managed care in the United States, and to try to give you a little bit better perspective, hopefully provide you with some tools or means by which to evaluate plans, look at your specific practices, and then make the appropriate decision. Format. We're going to keep this as informal as we can. I've put together a bunch of questions that I've run by my panelists. I'll use that as fodder for discussion, but certainly if each or any one of you in the audience have a question that you'd like us to address, this is a wonderful panel with a wealth of knowledge to bounce it off of. So gentlemen, let's see. Take the 30,000-foot view of your experience with managed care over the past X number of years. And Dick, I know in your situation it may be the not experience, but if you can start, Scott, for us and tell us how things have evolved in your practice over the past however many years you've been actually practicing.
Well, so when I first came out of residency, I spent my first 10 years in med-surg practices where I really didn't deal with managed care as in terms of managed vision care. Over the last 14 years, or 11 years now, I've had a private practice, and so it's been very interesting, and I'm sure we'll get into this later. I have went from a model where when I purchased the practice, they were about 95% managed care to a place now where we're only about 30% managed care, and as I'm sure we'll talk about later in this session, that's been a real struggle. I guess I can summarize it very quickly, and is most docs in the United States would love to get where you are at right now. That's their goal, is to get to a situation, a standard of practice where you are already at in Canada. And I'll just tee that up from that standpoint, and we'll go on from there.
Dick, any comments?
Well, we started out with indemnity plans, which were run by insurers as a true insurance plan that required defined coverage of procedure codes and defined what the patient would be paid. Early on, our profession decided not to get into relationships with insurance companies, but rather deal with the profession or patient directly. As time went on, we found that the indemnity plans would go up in premium dollar because it was one of the few benefits that people could use. And it was a happy benefit because you really can't enjoy life insurance. And disability insurance is important, but you really don't enjoy that either. But there were a lot of procedures that suddenly people could avail themselves with. As these costs went up, then of course people wanted to find a way to manage that, and one way is if you can manage to get between the patient and the provider. So we've had various incarnations of preferred provider organizations that were floated, capitation plans, and they have not been successful to the best of my knowledge. So most of us still relate directly to our patient. We define our own fees. We do not follow a fee schedule, though numbers are printed. So the Competition Act has put a stop to that.
John.
Gosh, I guess I'm disappointed to find out that now I'm the 3-decade experience on all of this.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, when I graduated in '84 and I started a cold start practice, I joined my state association. I served on the third-party committee, which was the committee that really evaluated managed care, and I think we have an important distinction here to take it away from managed vision care plans versus managed medical plans, and because in the States I practiced for 15 years, sold my practice. I served as the chief executive officer of a managed care organization, an MCO that had capitated plans. We controlled all of the eye care in Oregon, had a panel of 182 optometrists and 58 ophthalmologists, and directed that. And then I've devoted the last 15 years of my career to really helping to have optometrists understand the economics of their practices and practice at the highest clinical level, and also manage their profitability appropriately.
John, while we've got you there, you do a lot of consulting for practitioners like ourselves, as well as managed care organizations.
Right.
Look at this from an employer's perspective. What does an employer look for when they're looking at recruiting or engaging a managed care plan?
Great question, Mike. I also serve on the medical management committees for 2 insurers right now in the States. And, I can tell you that in the managed vision care market, it's a price-driven situation. So if I'm an employer, I'm, Acme Inc., for example, and I want to offer managed vision care benefits to my employees and their families, potentially, it's simply a benefit structure. I want to make sure that my employees have the best benefits that I can possibly afford, but then it becomes a price decision. And so what typically will happen is a company will put out an RFP, a request for proposal, and they will then bid it out to generally the lowest bidder who can provide those services.
So Scott, in your experience, as managed care becomes more entrenched within a community, a difficult question to ask, but do you expect continual rises in fees, or is there generally compression in fees?
Well, I think 2 points to that. One is I want to answer John's, because that's one of the things we've seen happen more so in the last 5 to 10 years than maybe the 10 years before that. But what we see is continual compression of fees. And that becomes strictly from competition, because where you guys are at right now, there's a discussion about having one managed care company. Let me be very clear that all the other managed vision care companies are sitting there waiting for one company to do all the hard work, and they will all be here. It won't be one, it'll be 8 or 9 once one gets in. And so in the States, what we look at is say that all these different companies compete for employer ABC to go. And so if managed care company number 1 goes to Acme Inc., then managed care company number 2 goes to Acme Inc., they're going to say, well, which one's the most competitive bargain? If they cut $5 off of each person's fee, each consumer's fee to go in and have an exam, for example, what we've seen in the States and what will most likely occur here as well is that reduction in fee does not come from the managed care company. Instead of charging a consumer $70 for an exam, you're going to get paid $65 for an exam. The managed care company then go to the employer, Acme Inc., and say, I can give it to you for $5 less than this company can. I promise you the managed care company will not be the one that takes the hit financially. Either the consumer will or the provider will. It will not be the company. And so what we've seen is continual compression of fees. And it may be 1 year, and each different managed care companies is different. In a normal optometric practice in the States, you got to think about what's going on from 9 to 10 different managed care plans, and each one's slightly different. In 1 year, managed care company A may say, I'm going to reduce your service fee by $3 or $4. Managed care B may say, I'm not going to do that because competitively as a provider, you're going to want to make more for your service. But instead what we're going to do is we're going to reduce your reimbursement for contact lenses. Third managed care company can say, oh, we're not like either one of those 2 companies. Instead, we're going to reduce your reimbursement in optical, or we're going to take optical away from you. So, these are business decisions, as John said, and as businesses, there gets to be more and more managed care companies in a particular system, there's going to be greater and greater competition for those businesses to survive, and they've got to cut fees somewhere. In the States, they all cut it across the board some way every year. Every year there's a 1 to 3 to 4% drop in something every year.
Mike, can I make a comment?
Absolutely, John.
So I'm going to summarize it like this. I think there's two thoughts I would like to get out there. How many of you, so we have to think about it this way. So I'm 54 years old. If I could take what I know now and go back in my career to when I graduated from optometry school at 24, but had what I know now in my head, would that affect my decisions going forward with what I did in my practice in joining managed vision care panels? And I could tell you unequivocally the answer is yes. I want you to think about this. How do you make every single decision that you make? And I always kind of joke about this with my clients, but I think that most decisions, when they come up like this, are based on fear and greed, right? And since greed is nothing more than the fear of being poor, everything is based upon fear. And we have to start thinking about how are you making your basis for a decision. And I just want to bring, when Scott talks about different things that come into play, different carriers coming in and how they adjust it. The average fee under a managed vision care plan in the United States today for a comprehensive examination is just hovering around $52 to $54 in that ballpark. When we start to look at recent changes that we've had by managed vision care plans in the States, carriers will say, well, we're going to take your plan, Mike, from $55 and we're going to pay you now $40. That's a $15 reduction. And you say, oh, that's not a big deal, John. It's just $15. I want you to start evaluating it on a percentage basis. If I came in and said, hey, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a 30% or 35% cut out of your wages, right? And now that's what you're going to have to deal with. That's what we're dealing with pretty much on a continual basis. And as Scott says, if it's not in one area, it's in another area, and they're very creative at doing it. And I just have 2 slides I want to show real quick, because I think you're at a Y in the road. But here's the most important thing. I don't think that's the appropriate Y. I think this is the Y in the road that you have to start thinking about. Why are you going to do this or not do this? And what kind of decision-making process or analysis are you going to actually go through when you're making that decision or when you're faced with it on an individual basis?
Because candidly, if you think you have administrative challenges now, I want you to take what you currently do now. When you put your manager or CEO hat on, how many of your hours a week you spend doing that? I want you to multiply times 9 or 10. That's how much time you will need to spend just to understand what's going on from a managed care perspective of one plan versus another plan versus another plan versus another plan, and what you need to do to be able to compete successfully in those plans. Do we make money in managed care? Yes, but each different plan is a different game that you have to play, and you have to know what the subtleties are of each plan and adjust everything in your practice based around that. Currently, and I've spent the last couple years up here speaking to Canadian optometrists, and I'll reiterate what I said earlier. We want to get where you are now.
Life just gets so complex, doesn't it? I mean, we see it in our respective clinical practices. There was a day when glaucoma was glaucoma, right? But now subacute narrow-angle glaucoma requires a completely different management strategy than does pseudoexfoliative glaucoma, for example. We get it. We live it every day. And to a certain degree, what I'm hearing from our panelists is that managed care is a little bit like that. Scott, from a practitioner standpoint, give us the size, the relative size of your practice, the number of docs, the number of employees, and how much staff time do you devote, or does your staff devote, towards claims administration and those sorts of things?
So Mike, I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. I mean, I do a tremendous amount of consulting, and my practice is by far not the norm in the States. Okay, so I'm going to do that disclaimer first of all. I would say that a normal, traditional optometric practice with 1 to 2 full-time ODs, it's going to have somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 patients a year. For every full-time OD in the States, you have to have 1 full-time coder, billing person. How many billing people do you guys have right now? Anybody got 3, 4, 5, 6? Nobody? Oh, wow. So what I want you to think about is this way, is the average practice in the United States has 1 billing person for every OD in the practice that works full-time. So there's $35,000 to $40,000 that you're going to pay to get paid. Now, in addition to that, you also need to understand that what's different now is, I would guess that most of your accounts receivable is relatively small, correct? Because people pay you in cash, right? Okay, so I want you to think of it in this perspective. Know that the majority, especially early on as you're starting to figure out managed care plans, your non-payment or denial will range somewhere between 8 and 10% of all claims that you send out will be denied. And you will pay your coding person approximately 25% of their work week will be figuring out, why didn't I get paid on this claim that I submitted? And early on, it's going to be much higher than 8 to 10%, promise you. But let's say it's 8 to 10%. The other part of that you have to understand is anywhere between 3 to 5% of the claims you will never ever get paid on. So it's not just the standpoint of right now, what's your collection rate? About 100%? Ballpark? Maybe if you're not great at what you do, it's 98%. Okay? So I want to explain to you that as managed care comes in, not only are you paying somebody an additional $30,000 to $40,000 a year just to get paid what you just did, sometimes 30, 60, 90 days later you'll actually receive the money. That's a cash float problem. In addition, at best, if you get paid 100% for what your usual and customary fees are, you may collect 85% of those fees. But we all know that that's not what's going to happen, because it isn't your usual and customary fees. It's some percentage of your usual and customary fees for services, materials, contacts, glasses, and I think we'll probably address that issue a little bit later about those. Now the other part you got to understand, and you guys, in my experience going around Canada for the last couple of years, I feel like I'm almost an honorary citizen at this point. My passport is completely full of Canada. It's not a good thing. There's lots of days I think I'd much rather live up here. Most days, actually. Is that there's a couple days in the winter that I'm not so sure. But
Me too.
yeah. But I want you to think of it from this way. Right now, you guys code how many codes for an exam and glasses and contacts? Right? What's your code? Do you have 4 codes? Okay, I want you to think of it. So I'm wearing a pair of progressive, high index, premium progressive, high index with transition with anti-glare. To code to get paid for this pair of glasses takes 9 codes. If any one of them are incorrect, you get denied. So what's your code for a pair of glasses now? Will that be cash, check, or charge? Okay. It won't be that way. 9 different codes for one pair of glasses. Now, John, and I'm not sure if he's wearing the same progressive or the same material or the same transitions or whatever, his code may be completely different than mine. And by the way, each one of these codes has a different price structure times 9 different managed care companies. And I have to decide exactly what I'm going to do. In fact, I'm going to let you go to the next question. I have it in my bag. I just want to show somebody what we deal with every day in terms of figuring out our pricing. I forgot to bring
While you're
that up.
doing that, Dick, I'd like your perspective, John, if you hold your thought for a second, your perspective on how you deal with this in your practice as a dentist.
I don't know where to start. The first observation is if I was graduating now, I'd get a Canadian Tire store. With respect to coding, we ran into this in the early 70s. And each insurance carrier had their own form, they had their own procedure codes, and we said, I don't think that's going to happen. So we developed standard coding, which is coast to coast. It's 5-digit codes, and it's not so much for the fee, but to report what we did. The fee should be set independently. Oftentimes, they plug in the fee guide code, and you shake your head. But the decisions I've made, I make them in the order of the ethical decision first and the business decision second. And if it means my patient has a restriction on free choice, or I'm going to be answering to a managed care company second, that's off the table. If I'm buying a material or a device, I decide what the device is, then I shop for the best price. So with respect to managed care, I would look at this and discount it on several ethical programs. I run a very weird practice. It's a very small practice. We run it in a business-like manner, but we do not run it as a business, full stop. And I think that's anachronistic right now. I have a simple philosophy in practice. If I treat my patients well, I will survive, and I get the money that's left over after the bills are done. We have no sales quotas, we have no marketing program. And I don't do badly. I can afford to fly twin-engined airplanes and still eat at the end of the day. So it's people like us that you really want to get rid of, because we're not business people. I didn't go into this for smoke and mirrors.
I'll make an editorial comment on a Canadian tire company. My dad owned and operated one of the largest tire dealerships for Firestone Tire and Rubber Company in North America, and he steered each and every one of us children away from the business because of the radialization of the industry. He said, radial tires, they take customers away for long periods of time.
Wow.
John?
So I guess I'm the, anti-Dick. I am, so I am a totally business-driven guy. I mean, my background is I'm a tech and finance guy that happens to be an optometrist, and so I approach everything from a business perspective. I do agree with you in saying that ethics and morals cannot come secondary to business, but I think they both need to be considered and given equal weight. One of the things that and Scott, by the way, 54 is still single vision and accommodate great. No,
Nice.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'm sure, John.
No, plus 2.25. The thing is this, is that when you join a managed vision care company, and I'm going to separate that distinctly from a managed medical care company, remember that what you're doing is you're signing a contract. It's an you'll call it a provider agreement or however they want to spin what it is, but at the end of the day, it's a contract which governs what you do, how you do it, when you do it, what tests need to be performed, and then what you're going to get paid for it. And I've been spending the last 15 years of my life in my current role in defending optometrists when they are being removed from the panel because they didn't follow the rules, or they followed the pricing rules incorrectly, or they applied the rules with discrimination or bias to their patients, or they started to give discounts to other patients and then they harmed the insurance company this way. And so there are a lot of rules that need to be followed on that. And these things are, with the penetration, I guess, what did you start off saying is that, in the early days of doing things, 30 years ago when I graduated and started doing it, you'd say, gosh, this is a really good thing. I want to be able to get patients in, and we talk about volume and things like that, and I'll address that in another question. But, we look at that as being such a good thing, and volume at any cost is not. And you have to be able to do that independent analysis each and every time when you're approaching it. And Scott's not kidding when he's talking about the number of codes to describe different things that you're doing. And today it may start out, I understand that the current things that you're looking at involve allowances and those sorts of things. That's okay, that's where we started off too, but it's not where things end up, because at the end of the day, and you'll have to, I'll apologize in advance for my comment, follow the money. I mean, you have to follow the money in every single situation that exists that you're put up with. I bet you haven't dealt with a single other situation in your life where when you're feeling like you're signing something, where is that extra layer that you talked about, something that gets between the patient and the physician, where that layer creates, something's going to be taken away from somebody along the way.
We're going to keep your finance cap on for a minute because I want to come back there. But Scott.
So so you'd asked me a question about my practice. I said my practice is a little different. I am definitely an enigma in the United States in that my practice is approximately only 30% managed care. The majority of practices in the States are somewhere in the 90% managed care range. I continually struggle every day to get less and less managed care.
Yeah, and he's correct. So managed medical care, the states are probably about, average practice about 65%, but managed vision care probably easily into the 90% penetration rate.
Right, and it's taken me a decade to get there. But I want to say, so that being said, is very few of my patients in the grand scheme of things are managed vision care. But I want you to look at, this is 2 weeks worth. This is our managed care. This is our what's called explanation of benefits, of what we got paid and what we got denied on. Okay? There are 37 pages. I have to have somebody go through this every 2 weeks and decide what did we get paid and what did we not get paid. This is one company, not 9, one. Okay? In addition to that, every time a consumer comes in, and I know where the plan, what plans said they're going to look like. And John brought up a great point. When we started, this is what we pull off the website every time a consumer comes in and says, I have a managed vision care plan. When I started 11 years ago, we got one page. Now we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each one of these, if I say I want one progressive, they have a $31 copay. If I say they want a different progressive, it's a $39 copay. If they say want a third progressive, it's a $32 copay. Do you get the picture? And we got to understand this for in many practices, 9 different insurance companies. Each one is different. In this particular managed care company, there are 17 different plans times 9 different companies. And by the way, as I said before, if you do it wrong, when you get this, it has a negative number. It says you don't get paid. In fact, we take it away from what you charge the patient because you didn't bill it correctly. So what that means is you develop these big, ugly-looking spreadsheets. that says, this is what I actually charge out for a specific patient. And this has to be monitored every time a managed care company changes what they're doing. So you want to see a lot of administrative time, a lot of time that happens because every time a consumer sits down in managed care, somebody in my office has to pull these 7 pages or 8 pages, whatever I was, and say, let me go over the plan with you. How many of your staff does that now? Oh, nobody? You guys don't do that. Okay, so I want you to think about how many people you have now and add 10 minutes minimum if they're really good. Question mark, right? Y'all have great staff, right? Easiest part of business. Okay. Okay, I want you to add 10 minutes to every consumer experience you have. How many of you now need to hire another optician just to keep up? Just to go over what the employee's benefits are. And because the employees, I promise you, will not be able to read whatever language that is. It's not English to them. So, you know, those are all challenges that we face that we have to think about. It's not just as simple as here's the plan and here's what you get reimbursed. And it may start out that way, Mike, but we all know it doesn't end up that way.
John, while you've got your finance guy hat on, so how do our colleagues make that decision? Is it as simple as a overhead, chair time, cost calculation, and look what each patient with a particular plan brings to the practice? Or should they be factoring in excess capacity if they're not fully scheduled? You know, what do you,
Right.
if someone comes to you and consults and says, John, give me some words of wisdom, what would
Sure.
you?
Well, I think there's 2 ways to look at this, and I have a slide here that kind of illustrates what I call the triangle. That, you know, this is my holy trinity, right, of what we need to look at. But I want you to start thinking about it in this way. So, how many of you remember from school when you went through your practice management course, or whatever you call it, or whatever it was called, that you had to go through and calculate something called your chair cost? Something that's familiar, right? It's what it costs you to offer your professional services. What's your break-even point on a per-hour basis? So in the U.S. today, that's approximately $92 per hour is what it costs the average optometrist just to keep their doors open so they can provide their professional services. So if the average managed care plan is paying $50 per examination for managed vision care examination, and the average OD, let's say, is seeing 2 patients per hour, that's $100 that's coming in from gross revenue for the professional services. No materials yet, okay? So that means, what's my profit? $8 an hour. I mean, the way I look at it, even go work at Taco Bell, right? I mean, they got better benefits.
And free lunch.
And free lunch, right.
Breakfast now.
Yeah, that's right, the breakfast taco.
$8 doesn't pay for the Lipitor I got to eat after each
right.
every day, though.
But the thing is this, is that we go back to this triangle. So if somebody's going to say, we're going to come in and we're now going to reduce your reimbursement on your examination because another company came into the marketplace and went to the employer and instead said, instead of charging $6.29 per member per month as a premium, we're going to charge, you know, $5.50 per month per employee for a premium. So we have less dollars coming in, and doctor, we now need to reduce your exam fee down to $45. Okay, so if that's a $5 reduction, that's a 10% reduction in my gross income that I'm making. So now I'm at $90 for those 2 exams per hour at against a cost of $92. Now I'm losing $2 per hour to provide those services. So what we're finding is there are a couple of different pressures. I have to do one thing. I can't, if I want my profit to stay the same, but my income or my reimbursement has gone down, what has to change with my volume? I have to now change my volume to 3 per hour, or 4 per hour, or 5, or 6. And on top of that, since I have a schedule of reimbursements from my materials, I have now, that is also controlled on how much money that I can actually make from my materials. So what's happening is that with the internet presence of spectacles, right, and online, and let's just say alternative distribution channels of optical, where we've normally had those traditionally in our practices, patients are well educated. They go out and you can, go on the internet, you got Warby Parker, you got Zinni Optical, you got whoever they may be that patients can, get their glasses from, or contact lenses, whatever, and all of a sudden now you're going, wait a second, I didn't make money on my exams because I was hoping for the optical sale. I was hoping for that double pair, the sunglass sale, and all the different things that you and I lecture about, Scott. And all of a sudden now that's not there. So I've really got this thing going, and it's, as I say, it's avoiding the race to zero. The title's not by accident, because it's in what we've experienced, it's a constant ratcheting down, and most optometrists in the U.S. do not go through this analysis in their practice. And I would challenge every one of you, as you're approaching making your decision point on what you're going to do individually, know your numbers and forecast what they're going to be, because you're going to have to make additions to what they currently are now, make those adjustments, and then really start to sit down and say, okay, how many people do I have to see per hour? And you have to assume this, if they don't buy anything from me, because your examination, your professional service model has to stand on its own legs, and being a profit center within your practice. Don't use it as a loss leader to hopefully get the optical sale.
Can I make two real quick points?
Yes.
So first of all, is a question. How many of you would like to see twice as many patients as you see now? Okay. Whoa. Nobody wants to work harder? Where's the spirit, man? Two, how many would like to make half as much or 30% of what you make now and work the same amount?
Some people are going to be doing this now because of the new conflict of interest professional misconduct regulations that you make. Some optometrists will be making 30 to 40% less because they're going to have to pay overhead, lease payments.
No. Let me sure I'm clear on this. All of you will make 30 to 40% less more, pay 30 to 40% less than what you do right now. All of you, when managed care comes in. Number two, and I totally forgot what I was going to say now, managed to. Senior moment, yeah, thanks.
Come back to it as soon as you grab
I
it.
will.
Dick, how do you handle this in your dental practice? We've always struggled with this professional services material component. Managed care aside, how do you deal with it?
Well, we do provide services where there's a laboratory component, and it's expressed in Ontario as a separate procedure code. So if, for instance, we do a removable prosthesis or a crown or bridge, we quote a professional fee and a laboratory fee, which is flow through. Regulations do not allow you to pad the bill on a laboratory fee. Mm-hmm. In the United States, the dentists frequently quote a full fee, and then they try and get the cheapest possible prosthesis they can get, to the point of going offshore to Chinese labs. And God knows what you're getting out of there. Probably melamine, because that seems to be a common ingredient in powdered milk or whatever.
Ouch.
But we have to have a registered dental technologist sign off on the prosthesis, whether it's a crown, a bridge, or an implant. So from that standpoint, it's a little different. And with respect to insurance claims, coast to coast, as I said, we use the same 5-digit procedure code. Each province may or may not include that fee in their fee guide. It's up to us to determine our fee, and I was on the team that actually set up the electronic data interchange about 20 years ago. So what we will do is electronically submit a predetermination, which may or may not come back in real time, or will be asked for additional records, and the patient will know before we do an elective procedure what's going to be covered. If it's a basic claim, we'll send it in electronically, and right away at that appointment, they'll have an explanation of benefits in their hands. If you collect from the patient directly, they know what their portion is. It's one collection. We have nobody in our billing department. I think last year I wrote off $400. My accounts receivable yesterday were $1,100, and it's all current.
So the average accounts receivable in the United States today is 1 to 1.5 times 1 month's gross production. That's the average OD's, AR.
If I could just add,
Yeah.
If I'm going to work pro bono, I want to decide for whom I work. I don't want it decided by somebody in a suit.
We need to quote that one,
I think
John.
we had a question. In
Yeah,
the back.
is there a question in the back? Yes, doctor. Oh, could you, if you'd be kind enough to come up to that microphone, sir? Because the proceedings
I
are being
did.
recorded. We make sure that we get everything. I can paraphrase it, but it'd be better if we got it accurately. Does that work? Thank you.
When the vision care companies drop your fee, you guys have co-pays, don't you?
Yes.
So can't you raise your copay?
No.
So you can't balance bill up to what you want to make.
No. So here's how it's set, and I'll use the verbiage that there's a maximum allowable that's set. So the maximum allowable for a given procedure, let's just say a comprehensive eye exam and a refraction, let's say is at $50. That mean, and if the patient or the plan, right, goes to sell a certain level of premium to the employer, they may say, oh, you know, Dr. DePaulis, we gave you an excellent plan. Your employees only have to pay a $10 copay. So the employee would pay the $10 copay, the plan would pay $40. I might
So
sell
it's a $50 max.
$50 max. So you have a limit on this.
And they do
okay?
that on eyewear and contact lenses as well in terms of
Typically, you're going to be given an allowance for the material side of things that the patient can spend up to. And then if the patient wants to buy more, an additional pair or whatever, then they also mandate discounts. So you're mandated to give a discount for additional types of materials or services.
So
So
my understanding right now is what they're offering to Canadian optometrists is that we can charge a balanced billing, which is whatever our customary fee is.
Yes.
So if it's $200 for an eye exam and they're going to pay $75, we're allowed to bill $125. Going back in history, was there a time where they didn't tell you what your copay was going to be? That
No.
they didn't
No.
give you a
No,
max,
they
or was
They
it
give us
always
just like that?
So they
It
said
was-
you can charge whatever you want above. When did that change? How long into the?
I would disagree with Scott on this. I don't think I've ever experienced in the United States where they said, oh, you have an allowance towards your examination and you can balance bill. Managed vision care has always had a limitation in my personal experience on what the limit is for your professional services. You could balance bill on materials, you could do other types of things,
materials.
but not on your eye exam. That was a fixed type of a deal. But what ends up happening is, and you have to understand that I have, even in my 30 years, I was never in an environment where there is a single company that, you know, claimed to come in and own a market. Because the minute that the second company comes in is when everything starts
Market
to
pressure.
erode. And I can guarantee you that I've heard, I'm trying to think where I heard this. I can't remember specifically. But if there's solidarity, quote unquote, that everybody joins, it's going to make it a strong plan. I think that's a very misleading statement. I think what that really means is how attractive is this marketplace to another insurer who wants to come in and start to go to compete for those premium dollars from the employers. And remember that you're just at that point in time an optometrist, and I tell this to my U.S. audiences when I lecture all the time. You are nothing more than labor. You're just
That's
a
it.
widget. You're just a number on a balance sheet that says, here's how many providers we have, and they go to the employer and they say, you know, Mr. CEO or Mr. HR Benefits, Mrs. HR Benefits Director, we have 200 providers in the radius of your business that can see your patients. They never tell them what they pay us. They just say, we can save you 20% over your existing premium dollars that you're having today.
So once I'm up, the other question I have is, in the U.S., my understanding from my U.S. colleagues is that when a patient comes in for a routine exam, they make every attempt to make it a medical exam. So they say, oh, you have dry eye. So now the billing changes to a more medical as opposed to refractive, and apparently they can get more
Yeah, so I will tell you-
reimbursed better. But in Canada, if we make it a medical exam, it's going to be provincially covered. So there's no way for us to go up. The province pays us even less.
So do me a favor and tell your U.S. colleagues that are telling you that to never say that in public again.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
because that
Or
is-
give me their name so I can turn them in
Yeah.
and get the 10%.
So
reimbursement.
I do.
Absolutely.
As in my bio, I'm the medical coding. I mean, I do 275 lectures a year on medical coding in the U.S. I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm probably the guy, right? And what your U.S. colleagues are telling you is completely inappropriate and should not be done.
Yeah.
Okay, when a patient comes in,
and illegal.
when a patient comes in for a routine exam, it is a routine exam. It does not get changed. It cannot get converted to a medical exam at that point in time.
You know, fundamentally, you do only what the patient needs, right? What brought them into the office, what was indicated, and you bill only for those services. And I couldn't echo the sentiments of my colleagues
But even a routine exam, they have high pressure?
No, that doesn't matter.
Well,
it's still a routine exam, would
so-
be billed to the,
Yeah, the routine exam,
Very,
high
very
pressure.
clear rules.
Ocular hypertension, you bill that visit out as a routine exam. That's the appropriate thing to do for the patient's visit. You then have a conversation with them about their ocular hypertension. If you think that they're at risk, significant risk of converting to glaucoma, then you set up an appointment a later day to do the requisite workup there. But you don't
Okay,
do
so
those
maybe
sort of
that's what they
things.
meant, but they bring them back as now medical patients.
that would be correct.
And then the
Correct.
billing is
And then the
more
medical-
significant. 'cause
then the
they get
medical-
paid.
Not
No,
always.
no.
Not always more significant.
So just remember that
No.
it becomes a different responsible party.
Right.
Right, that they have to fulfill that contract, whichever contract they sign. And, you know, sometimes that's at a loss as well. It just depends, again, on the provisions of the contract. And I would tell you that the other overheads thing that Scott did leave out, and I know he's got it in his numbers there, is that most offices in the U.S. spend an inordinate amount of time in verification of benefits because of the 9 different carriers and the 17 different plans per carrier that eventually comes down, with penetration in the marketplace. Just being able to understand what the patient has, because they don't know what their benefits are. They come in and they go, I've got my card. I don't know what it does, and we'll say, that's your library card. It does nothing for us here, right? But, we have to find out what their benefits are and what their structure is and what they're entitled to, because they don't know.
Many of you know, I'm a big workflow efficiency guy. That's my big thing that I spend a lot of time talking about. And the average managed care patient will add approximately 23 minutes to your exam experience with that consumer. And that 23 minutes isn't with you. That 23 minutes is with your billing staff and your front desk and your optical as your consumers go, I don't get it. I thought all this was paid for.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to, before you go to your next question, can I just show one slide
Sure.
that'll put a bow on this little topic area?
Absolutely.
And I'm just going to
And
say,
then I got a question for you
I just want you to
related to doctor's comments.
think about this. It's really managed competition. That is truly what managed care stands for, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't come down to what's best for the patient. Sure, we're trying to get patients care, but it becomes managed competition is what it really is, because then it's relegated to which practitioners can see whom and how frequently and what can you do and all of those different rules.
And what materials do you get to choose from? Because at least in the States, consumers don't have free choice of what products they're going to get if they want to have it at a discount. They have a set amount. They can either have this set of frame line or this set of frame line or this set of frame line. Those things are somewhat mandated, which means we've now lost most of consumer choice.
And on that note, that leads into my next question. Scott, John, you've been dealing with managed care for 20 years. Does that affect the psyche of the consumer/patient? Do they look at their managed care optical benefit is sort of a nice little starting place and they're going to opt
No.
up to more premium eyewear? Or do they kind of look at that benefit, whatever it is, as being what they're allowed to spend and therefore more likely to make decisions that are influenced by that?
And this is one of the things, even as much private pay as our practice got to, I think there are two to three groups of people in terms of managed care patients. One is the entitlement group that says, I only want what my insurance covers. And you've heard that John and I have not, and even Mike and Dick have not really talked about it in the terms of insurance, because it isn't insurance. It's a managed discount plan. And that's what we go and try to tell everybody. This is not insurance. This is a managed discount plan. You're getting a discount. That discount's coming out of my pocket. It didn't come out of the insurance company's pocket, and it didn't come out of the employer's pocket, and it's probably not coming out of your pocket. Thank you for your contract, but I'm the one who loses the money. So there's a group that comes in and says, I only want what my insurance will cover. I love that phrase. And you have to train your staff on how to deal with that discussion of, yes, but what's covered is so poor. You know, I'm not doing what's in your best interest if I only give you what your managed discount plan covers. Group number 2 are people that says, thank you, I'm great for this discount, but I want this. Well, those are the people you go, and let me explain managed care to you so next year you want to come in and just be cash pay. Because you already want the best, you're going to learn that you're not getting the best deal, you just think you are because that's what you've been told. And then there's the group that doesn't care, and they just get frustrated because the prices keep going up and up and up. And you know, we look at that in the United States in terms of just general healthcare reform. Now our prices in the U.S. have escalated so much because we're having to compensate private pay patients. We have to make our money on private pay because we're taking such a beating on our managed care patients.
I'd add a couple of things to that. So I think that the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen a huge transformation. So when the U.S. went into a recession in 2008 and the financial crisis and all of that, I think that the Scott's number 1 patient who said, I only want what my plan provides, ended up becoming the majority of situations in most offices, just because people were unsure of their economic status in doing things. In the past same time period, internet, alternative optical channels have really developed, and we've seen a much greater penetration into the marketplace as well. And what we're seeing now is that there's what I call a vertical integration from all of our companies. So whether it's company XYZ or company XMedYZ or whatever you want to call them, they're saying now, listen, you can only use our products with your patients. So the freedom of choice that you have, you might say, I want to use this type of progressive lens because this really fits my patient's needs the very best. And they're going to say, well, I'm sorry, you signed up with our plan, you have to use our frames, our lenses, our coatings, our this, and when it's taking away our ability to be a physician in being able to prescribe what is actually the best outcome for our patient. And it's very hard to explain that to the consumer because they say, but I'm paying dollars to be able to get this covered. And they say, no, what you paid is dollars to get this, and this is all you get. And so if you want that other type of premium progressive, or if you want this coating, or if you want this frame, I'm sorry, that's not covered. So that's going to be a complete out-of-pocket type of a situation.
This is your base model that you just paid
right.
for.
And the vertical integration is happening, and that's the latest thing in the U.S. It's really escalating.
We're running up against a time limit, but I do want to get that doctor's call
There's
question.
a hold, I guess, in the U.S., and our U.S. colleagues are trying to figure out how to get out of this hole. So my question to you is, what are you doing? And in terms of the Canadian landscape, what do you suggest?
Well, can I answer it real quick?
Sure.
I don't think there's
Can you repeat the question for our
the question
video
was,
over?
is in the U.S. there's a revolt, and what are we doing to try to get our colleagues to do about it? I would actually tell you that I don't think that there's a revolt. I wish there was a revolt, okay? I really do, because I don't think that our peers really understand the nuances of what's happening in their practices. And I think that most people have gotten either complacent or they're just resigned to saying, this is how it is and I can't change anything. And that's what saddens me. And it's what invigorates me at the same time to go out and try to get my colleagues to go through an economic analysis so they can truly understand what's happening and what is impacting both their ability to deliver, appropriate care and to make the type of living that they need, that they should be able to make.
Let's take a few questions. Do we have, Christopher, do you have time? Because we're right up, we won't keep you much more than 5 minutes. Yes, if you go to the microphone there.
I'm just kind of wondering what the economic outlook would be for an office that doesn't sign up on any of the vision plans.
Thank you, doctor. That was my last question we didn't get to.
Like in a situation, maybe you're in an area where there's 10 offices and maybe 2 of them don't join up on the vision plan. So what's the economic outlook for them guys?
Tell us about out-of-plan providers.
I'm a perfect example. I mean, I have 4 other providers in my locale, and 2 of them take every single plan. And when somebody comes in and says, I take plan number 4 out of 9, which I know that there's absolutely no way I can make money on them unless I can sell them a second pair and or an annual supply as their second pair. That's the only way to make money. I am very happy to refer those to my competition because I want them to win the race to 0. As John says, and I use it all the time. In fact, I ran into one the other day at one of my kids' lacrosse games. He goes, I just want to say thank you. You're killing me. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're sending all of those patients to me and I can't make any money on them. I said, you bet.
Dick, you've been dealing out a plan for years.
Well, with us, much of our work is elective. If I face a group such as yourselves and say, what's the best way to replace one missing front tooth? I've got 8 or 10 options. Comes down to an informed consent discussion with the patient, risk, benefit, cost. And I'm surprised as you were talking here, I was looking at 2 of my patients, one who owns a very well-known insurance company in this country, who will only do what the plan covers. He's worth $500 million. He's as tight as they come. And I'll have other patients who will come in and say, I really want this, and I borrowed the money from my sister, and you think, oh my God. So at that point, you're trying to help them out.
That's why he's worth a
Did anyone see Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman? And at the very end, he came out of character and said, and I have these conditions. And Dabney Coleman said, good God, here come the conditions. Well, that's what you've just shown us. We had an issue with the insurance industry, and I work with lawyers a lot, and they have a phrase that says you can't have it both ways. So what happened in the early days of dental insurance? A patient would come into the dentist, that'll be $100. Oh, I have insurance. Well, in that case, it's $150. So we had people who made us look like idiots. So what the Canadian Dental Association came up with, and I'm going to quote this from their code of ethics, a dentist must not determine treatment decisions or fees based solely on the existence of a third-party plan. So the ethics is, if you have an OHIP patient, that is a contract between your association and the Government of Ontario, full stop. If you have a private patient, you have a normal and customary fee. If you're treating people by virtue of membership in a panel at a lower fee, you're asking your private patients to subsidize the people who run around in left-handed circles and wave a smoking stick. I do not see the ethics of conferring a lower fee simply by membership in a plan. And
I was just going to, can I add one thing?
Go ahead.
We have one more question back there, Doctor. Come while you guys are commenting.
I was just going to say, I deal with a lot of my colleagues who I actually help to quit plans. So they'll hire me to help them do the analysis, and I help them quit being on a managed vision care plan. And invariably, what the comment is, and there's a huge fear factor. I mean, absolutely huge, because they've been on this plan for a long time. They think that it's putting a lot of volume into their practices and what's going to happen to my practice. And invariably, the first 3 months are a little tenuous for them. After 6 months, they go, oh my God, why didn't I do this 10 years ago? Because I'm seeing less patients, and I'm making more money, and I'm able to deliver the care that I want to give to my patients. And I think that that's why my first slide was, you're at a Y in the road here. You actually have an opportunity to do an individual analysis and make an individual choice of how you want to practice from this point going forward.
Mike, can I do this one real quick? Let's take 2 seconds.
2 seconds.
Okay, two seconds. Okay?
2 seconds.
I want you to think like this. In the U.S., we kind of joke about the form that cash is really the best. How many of you accept cash? Okay. You now participate in the best managed care system in Canada. You're managing their care, and you're not letting anybody else tell you what to do.
Question for the group. We have 2 colleagues that have questions. Do you want to stay and listen to the panel answer them? Okay.
Mine is more a comment than a question. Judging by what I've just heard here, I can't imagine in my wildest dreams why anyone in this room would sign up for one of these things, quite frankly. First of all, we've had managed care in all the provinces. It's called government health care. We've done pro bono work for all health-insured persons, children up to the age of 20 and 65 and over. They're essentially it's essentially pro bono eye exams. People who have benefit plans in this country, what we typically do, and I'm sure all of us in the room do, we bill the patient directly. The benefits, the patient does the paperwork themselves to collect their benefit. Okay, we charge our fee. They get whatever benefit they've arranged. Why? I'm not sure why we have to sign up for this kind of why we have to sign the plan. Let the patient deal with it. Let the patient do the paperwork.
As Mike said in the beginning, this is going to be an individual choice for every one of you. Yeah. Every single one of you have to make this choice. what I think that the panel was trying to say today is that we want you to think about everything that's involved to make the best choice for you. My concern is that people make the choice saying it's going to put more butts in my chair. And the answer is that may be true temporarily, but all it's really doing is you're running faster to get to zero.
There's nothing to think about here.
Doctor, last question.
My question, if a company signs their employees on for managed care, does that mean that you as a provider have to accept that managed care to see those people? Do the employees have an option to go to somebody outside of the individuals on the managed care group?
Well, I don't know how your contracts will be written up here, but if you know, they would have a lower reimbursement back to them. So if I was seeing a patient that was, we'll call it out of network, that they chose to come to me and not stay with a doctor within their managed care organization, then I can provide my services, I charge my fee, and the patient gets reimbursed less. But they're incentivized, obviously, through what they have to pay out of pocket to see a panel doctor.
I see. So people still do have the freedom if they want, they're not forced.
In some
It's not an all or nothing where if they don't go to one of the providers under the managed care list, they won't get any reimbursement whatsoever.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
No.
I said that in some conditions. It depends on that individual contract that patient has with that managed care company. Because Dick could work for company A and he has plan A that allows him to have an out-of-network benefit. Mike here could have plan B that doesn't offer him any out-of-network benefits whatsoever. So if he came to see me, he wouldn't get any of it, the participation of his benefit structure.
I have a second part to that question. The big union employers, example, General Motors, Ford Motor Company, Chrysler, have they gone to managed care or have their unions protected them so they had freedom of choice in their selections? Like, because unions generally protect people to give them freedom of choice. What's happened with the big three?
Well, I can tell you, and this I'll have to say as disclosure, I was on the AOA's third-party executive committee. We were dealing with a lot of this because actually optometry was locked out of providing care for many of the United Auto Workers unions in the U.S. Because of certain ERISA privileges that, you know, certain types of laws that allowed the employers to create a selective panel all on their own, and they chose not to include optometry. And the AOA fought against us and advocated, you know, against us for many years and was successful finally in the last couple of years to actually get optometrists to see them. For vision care benefits, they do allow, you know, optometrists to provide those benefits, and in some cases now medical care to those employees as well.
Dick, final comment.
Okay, so it was almost like a collusion by the managed care to keep optometry out initially, and it took a legal action to reverse that to allow optometry into the playing field, is what I'm hearing. Is that what you're saying, basically?
There was no legal action involved.
Well, whatever action they had to take to get themselves back on the list so that they could, that auto workers could go to them as patients and as, you know, for the things. Okay, thank you. You've answered my questions.
And I guess I will just say, I mean, I know that I will be around for a couple of hours to answer questions after the panel is over as well, so I welcome them.
Three quick thank yous. Christopher, thank you to you and the Ontario Association of Optometrists for putting together this symposium. Panelists, thank you for your time and expertise. And those in attendance, thank you for doing what you do every day, and let's take good care of your patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. On behalf of the OAO and the audience today, I want to thank you very much. It was an extremely enlightening discussion. I know our members here learned a lot of information, so thank you again.
Thank you.
And as Michael mentioned, some of the panelists will be around to help answer your questions.